please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Stuart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. So we're reinstituting our more precise workshop format where we are only going to make decisions that would have some kind of bad impact were we to wait for the next regular meeting. So with that, I just want to confirm, even before we get to the rules discussion, a couple of the kind of rules we used to operate by, make sure we're still on the same page. Unless, except for the few that are time sensitive, there'll be no decisions made. It's a discussion only, which means we have limited public input. It's not going to be a problem necessarily tonight. But also we had discussed back, I think last fall, that workshops would last from 7 to 9, and we'd have a firm kind of cutoff at 9 to kind of keep ourselves disciplined and constrained. Is that something we want to stay with tonight, or is that
9 or 9:30?
I remembered it at 9, but I don't know what it was. Or we can just wait until we get to board procedures. I just maybe see if there's a guidance on that.
I support you in trying to form better habits than we have gotten into this past year. We were doing very well, and then all of a sudden, so I think we should try. If we're in the middle of something that everybody thinks is vital.
All right. Well, how about this? I will do my best to facilitate the meeting to end at 9. If I start to get a little bit too aggressive with it, just tell me to back off, and we'll extend it from there.
Okay.
Well, if we aim at 9, we'll probably end at 9:30 anyway. So now let's get. I guess actually we usually don't do public comment, but is there anything in particular? It is on the agenda, so I figured we'll do that now.
Yeah, I just got some quick stuff.
Yeah, please.
I'm Fred Chapman, New Falls Kayaking. Been down there at the boat launch at Sojourner Truth Park, off and on, obviously, for the whole summer. And I've seen just a couple of things down there that can be handled very quickly, and you guys, as the board, can make decisions down there. So very quickly, a handful of things. When I see alcohol use, do I do nothing? Do we just let it go? There is sign that says no alcohol. Again, you guys are the board, you make these decisions. When I see motorboats coming in and out of there, which I've seen, it says no motorboats. You guys are the board, you make those type of decisions. I am there and I do see these things. Smaller things like right where kayaks and boats, canoes load and unload, right there, a lot of times you'll see people fishing from the back of their trucks. Their trucks are right against the water, and it makes it very hard, almost near impossible for kayakers and canoers to get in and out of the water if people are just parked there. Maybe there should be a loading, unloading sign. Or when people are just parked down there and in their kayaks away down there by the river instead of parking up. I mean, these seem like easy general things that everyone should know. Unfortunately, don't, and I'm just wondering, should I do anything about these things?
Tell you, it's actually pretty simple.
Yeah,
One is, and more. Thank you for asking, by the way.
Yes,
it's a fantastic question, and thank you. The basics are just common sense, right? If you see someone drinking in the park, just let them know. I mean, just basic politeness, because there are public parks where you can drink, have open containers. You don't happen to have any of those.
Yeah.
So, but if you see people, maybe just remind them of what the code says, because it, reduces your use of the park, everyone else's. And if there's someone who's belligerent or whatnot, if it's during the daytime, please call the head of public works. You have my cell phone number. Call me, and I'll take care of it. And of course, if there's ever anything that is, serious, let the police know, because they're there to enforce the law as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is, call Kathy, call Blue, call me.
Okay.
And me at 24/7. Then if it's daytime hours, it could just be something that's easily done.
Yeah.
So you're not. I don't want to put you in the position of either.
I don't want to police.
You're not.
I just want.
You're not. It's not your job to enforce any laws.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. My goal is just that everyone knows these type of things. So I mean, if I can put out a little sign right there that says, "Please, 15-minute unloading, loading zone," I mean, little
We
things
could do,
like
you know,
that.
I guess
If
we
you wanted to do that.
could do a little flyer without any problem.
Yeah.
So if you're there
I mean,
and
if
people
I'm there,
have
I'll do
questions,
something
here's
anyway.
here's the constraints in the park, and that's easily done.
Right on.
So maybe we can just do that simple fix and see what happens. And,
Absolutely. I
And
just
if there is a
wanna keep
problem,
you guys
call me.
informed. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Can we get a sign name? It just says.
I bet we have one because it's the same
I
rules for all
thought
the
there was,
parks.
I
you know?
think it must have disappeared. There was a sign
I wouldn't doubt it.
that said no parking,
Yeah.
launch.
Well, we need to redo that Sojourner Park sign anyway, the letter
Yeah.
peeling off. So I'll just add that to the list for that.
I think he's down there.
So
Cool.
signs, and then a flyer, kind of rules of the park. Because honestly, it's something that might even make sense to have post on your
Yeah.
wherever you're transacting.
Makes
because
sense to
then
me.
everyone's coming up to you and they can see. Because honestly, I can imagine nothing really belligerent is going on.
No,
There's no
no,
reason to think
no,
you
not
couldn't
at
put a
all.
motorboat in the river
Sorry,
unless we
restriction.
let people know.
Exactly, just
so.
a list, a known
Yeah.
list of rules or
Yeah.
things. I mean, you have them there, but it doesn't hurt to have them again.
Exactly.
Cool.
Thank you, Fred.
Yeah.
What about the motorway?
What about?
Tricky called DEC, you're not allowed to have motorboats on the river, what you can do with that?
No, that's what I was saying. Call staff if it's during the daytime hours.
Okay.
Call me on the weekends because I'd rather have me make the call to the DEC or the police than Craig because he's just a vendor. I don't want him
No,
involved.
exactly.
So
That's
he has my cell phone number. If you see something, just send me a text. Send me a call.
Keep it easy.
Yeah,
If you see something, say something.
yeah, good.
Yeah. yeah.
Feel free to search anyone's backpacks or trunks as they come into the park. We'll get you a stick and a badge. We'll find
Long
something.
to have a badge, yeah.
But in general, if anybody saw motorboats go down there, they should call the DEC. They don't have to call us first.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
That's what I
Call
was saying.
DEC.
Yeah. In
Right.
general,
Police.
call the police. Call
You
DEC.
can call the village, and
Yeah.
I'm sure Kathy would take care of it if you just wanted to not have to deal with DEC.
But
So,
please
yeah.
don't do anything that would jeopardize your own safety.
I promise you
Yeah.
I will not.
And that's Ariana. That's really the main issue. Is as Craig was there, who's going to be there. I figured
Right, I know.
rather than put him in a position to repeatedly call the police or DEC.
Yeah.
I was more just clarifying for
Yeah.
the public.
Thank you. Rich, are you here for something specific or just curious about the conversation?
Yes.
All right, great. So why don't we have Kurt first? Now we did have. Now we are going to go over rules of procedure in a bit, but and one of them that we haven't been obeying, so it reminded me of, is we wanted to have guests sit at the end of the table because of the microphone, camera placement. That means everyone can be seen. So Kurt, if you wouldn't mind, and I'll just kind of basically, it's you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and trustees. Of course, the memorandum that was provided to you for your packet tonight is a follow-up, a revision from a prior memo that the mayor had discussed with you. It basically has to do with, this position, of course, is a new position, and I'm most pleased to be in it, and there were certain near-term priorities. In other words, having to do with the structure of the position and those things that were perhaps more urgent than others. So this is sort of a second draft of that. My priorities are your priorities and the priorities of the village. So all of these things are flexible. I'm not married to these things or in this order. So of course I'm looking for all feedback. The first item is with regard to the village code and those things that we might like to amend to be more responsive, and so that we don't find ourselves, sort of prisoners of our own code. So the first thing is we talked, of course, as before I came to the village, we had talked even during the interviewing process about updating the master plan, which I think it's certainly something I'm interested in working on, and the village has an interest in. At the same time, there are likely several code amendments regarding land use that should be undertaken before the commencement and completion of a master plan process, only because that process will elapse, and there are certain code amendments that we could take very much more quickly. One example is parking, and I've observed that we have a particular regulation that talks about municipal lots within a 400-foot radius of a land use and a municipal parking lot, not just legal on-street parking, but a dedicated municipal lot needing to be 400 feet of that site, That's rather, I think, confining. And I think that businesses and also our ability to attract additional business and their successes may be limited by that. So in understanding that there has been work on parking planning done already, I'd like to piggyback on that and also identify those spaces that are available, inventory them, and have the ability to work with the planning board and or zoning board. But again, the variance procedure for that would not be most desirable. What's most desirable is if the planning board had the discretion to size up a site plan, a new use, a reuse, and then be permitted to analyze the amount of legal public parking, whether it be parallel parking or otherwise, on-site, off-site, municipal, and parallel parking. So that's something that could be the subject of a code amendment with alacrity, not having to wait for that for very long. That's of course I want to also mention at the very same time those with parking credentials under the Americans with Disabilities Act. That would be for those with temporary or permanent limitations on their mobility would of course still have close-in parking, so they would not need to walk these or travel these greater distances. But I would suggest that an appropriate standard for expectations for those to walk from their cars to probably more than one stop in the village when visiting is closer to a quarter of a mile, which of course is about 1,320 feet as opposed to the 400-foot radius we have now. So I wanted to touch upon that one. We also have the B3 zoning district. There's been a lot of work within about the last 5 years. That work is still very relevant, does not need largely to be updated in any meaningful way. It still is just as pertinent as it was when it was done for the most part. So the notion would be that B3 corridor, which is Route 32, going north, the notion there is to allow for significant development proposals in that corridor and have them be able to advance before we might consider a moratorium in some other districts in the process of updating our master plan and zoning. The moratorium, of course, will be put into place in certain places in town to avoid what's known sometimes as a race for diligence to come in under the wire of current regulations. So we would be able to, and this is of course a very accepted method of preserving the status quo to some degree, so that when the zoning takes place, the zoning is adopted, it's not undermined by a lot of applications which are already complete and in the pipeline towards approval. So, yeah.
So we can pick specific zones that we want to have a moratorium. It doesn't have to be entirely village-wide.
That's correct.
Okay.
Or types.
That's,
Maybe
yeah.
different types.
It could be districts, it could be geographic areas, but that is a legitimate action by the board to exempt some districts. For example, the B3 is something where, again, a large volume of recent planning work within the last 5 years has been done. And again, that's going south on 32. And I think as you look at that corridor, there are several properties which we might refer to as underutilized, and many people who either live in the area or visit New Paltz may not even be aware. It's not even that clear where the village ends and the town begins. But for our purposes, there's a fair distance, probably something in the order of about 2/3 of a mile before you actually enter the town, and that's even past town hall. And we have an opportunity to entice certain types of development, multiple use, really, multi-use on the very same site, and that everything from various kinds of residential, commercial, or retail on the first story, and for whatever demand there is for office space, that could also be made available. And that could be exempted potentially, after consideration by the board, for, and a moratorium would not be in effect there. But right now, there's, for example, there's parking for, I guess, what is a park and ride. And there's been improvements. The county undertook certain ancillary improvements, such as sidewalks and smooth transitions for even ADA accessibility from the sidewalks to the curb cuts. Those, that lot, as far as I can observe so far from my own travels, as well as looking at aerial photographs that actually have specific dates. You can actually determine the day and year and the month when they were actually captured. That lot, it's not widely known. In other words, I'm addressing the issue of whether there's a perception of a parking problem in the village. Some more populous villages and small cities and other places have decided to go forth with the construction of large parking structures. So far, I don't see that as really necessary here, and it can be quite expensive. So the notion here would be to alert people. For example, that lot, which is new and well designed, I think I counted approximately 75 spaces or so. And therefore, people might become more aware that you can park there, and the walk to, for example, Front Street, and it is really not at all a really exhausting walk, unless the weather happens to be like today. So
just to note, it wasn't even on Google Maps, and I just reported it to Google Maps yesterday.
excellent. Yeah.
Parking lots on Google Maps.
That's why no one uses it.
You mean,
I mean, it's got to be that's part of it. I
you
mean,
mean an identification of
Yeah.
what that? Yes. Yeah. As opposed to just knowing we know it because we know where it is. But you're right. The notation. They have so many notations of what things are. So, and I recently saw one of their vehicles coming down Main Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on 32 actually.
Yeah. So the notion would be to, along that corridor, another, I mean, again, for example, there's a car wash, a B West car wash. It's not even apparent whether that site is still operational. The facilities are basically a lack of maintenance, and even if you were to pull in there and seek to use the facilities, I'm not even sure how often they maintain the machines that provide for that. So there, again, just to me, a glaring opportunity for development, and I think it could help address some of the pressure on the rental market. But we can talk about that in more depth. But there's at least one proposal that's been known for a while. It's about a 3-acre site, and there have been some renderings proposed for it, and I think I'd recommend that we allow ourselves to begin reviewing that, as that application might be formalized, and then at the same time we move to adopt many of the recommendations, such as they are, or revised, to allow development to proceed in that area. And I think it could help not only the tax base, but also just the whole continuity of the village. Another item is an analysis of impediments for safe routes for cycling and pedestrians. Obviously, we're looking to avoid injuries. There may not be large numbers of fatalities, but there's also collisions, and they can result in great injury, and so to say the least, it's something to be avoided. As other communities have taken advantage of what's known as streetscaping programs, or now there's a new catchphrase. There always needs to be new catchphrases, I suppose, to keep people on their toes to be able to identify with these things, and that is complete streets. So while both Congress and the Senate at the national level have finally come to terms on a transportation bill that would fund certain projects and provide for grant funds for the next 2 years, that was overdue. It's finally been passed and reconciled by both houses of Congress, and so the program funds will begin to flow. Unfortunately, they've done things like eliminate safe routes to schools as a distinct line item that you could apply to, but nonetheless, I think the Village of New Paltz is in a very good position to compete for funds even in a time of somewhat diminishing of revenue streams for these things. But I still think we're in a good position for that. What I might suggest is that we start with Main Street. I know that we're confined somewhat by the facades and the prevailing setbacks, but there's I think there's room to maneuver and create slightly wider sidewalks and create an environment whereby motorists can easily ascertain that they should exercise a little more caution. We may be prohibited from going from 30 to 25 miles an hour. 30 might, and a lot of times, 30 on Main Street might seem like 80 on a state highway. In other words, when you think of the scale and the proximity to cars and the narrowness. So if we can't go to 25 because our Main Street is also State Route 299, we could certainly do things which would make for a better awareness, and I think smaller spans for pedestrians and cyclists, disembarking from their bikes and walking across. I would point to the one location at the intersection where P&G's is. Of course, there's sort of a bump out there, and I think we all recognize that there is. At the time that was done, I don't know when that was, but
2003.
2003. So there is sort of an enhanced safety there. If I understand correctly, cars used to go around to the right and pass people. At the same time, people might be gathering at that popular intersection. So those are the types of things, along with not utilizing simply paint, which can quickly fade, but sort of patterns on the roadway to allow for, a lot of motorists are very courteous in New Paltz, but what we're really trying to do is firm up the safety for pedestrians of all ages and all levels of mobility and cyclists. So those are some of the things that I believe are immediate priorities, along with something that I think was being considered before I came on board, and that is along Hasbrook Avenue. We need to replace a sidewalk and a culvert which carries drainage beneath it. So as I understand, the mayor's briefed me that this was ongoing, and we have obtained two specific sets of cost proposals, and if we wanted a third, then that could be discussed in greater detail at the next meeting, unless there was any questions about that project.
And just so the board knows, I believe we're gonna have all that ready for next week's regular meeting.
Yeah.
So you'd actually see everything, but
Yeah.
we could give more details on what our options are for dealing with that park and the stream. And so
We've actually had two very responsive reactions from two landscape architecture firms, and they've gone so far as to meet with our village engineer in order to give us a complete view of all costs, not just the contractor, the village engineer, and the landscape architect acting independently. They've actually met, and we now can provide accurate costs in this. I will obtain a third, although right now I think we have two very well qualified landscape architecture
honestly,
firms.
2 is fine, because the board actually hasn't decided whether it's worth the added expense to daylight the stream or just replace what we have.
That's
So-
helpful. It really
So, but now
is.
we have the information, we can have that conversation, so thank you.
Very well equipped firms.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sal.
I sort of have been putting my thoughts in terms of priorities. And the three things that I'm aware of, we sort of have had on the burner waiting for your arrival was 1B3, which you address, but my question is much more specific, and that is, when will we have a proposal to adopt?
I would suggest placing that perhaps on the next work session, so you could give me the feedback for
We
that.
pretty much, we've had the community here, there's a whole list of business owners who would like to be involved involved in a discussion and planning on this.
B3?
And the clerk has
Yeah.
that, and she has a
I just
summary
wasn't sure.
of the discussion and comments about what types of business we would like to see in the B3. And, you know, there was concern about continuity, in other words, from North Front Street. You have businesses on North Front Street, you have them on Chestnut between North Front and Main, but then you have residential block, which clearly suggests nothing's going on in that. And then you get to the B, what is the proposed B, we call it Salvation Army and on out. And so there's a lot of discussion about trying to encourage businesses like bed and breakfast to develop along that, so that there would be a connection of downtown to B3, okay? And so all of that we have summaries of.
Okay.
Not only that, Sally, if you think about it, we have the kind of social scientific models that we use for transportation study and some other
Yeah,
work.
but I'm just,
But we also have, my point is only that between the transportation study and the B3 work that we handed, I think it's unlikely we're gonna get any different information if we did much more. We may actually be at the point where we need a draft of a law to
see, that's
talk
what
about
I
the specifics
think.
rather than.
I think when she said proposal,
Yeah.
that's what you meant.
That's what
exactly, yeah.
I'm suggesting.
But we can
I
use those
think-
other studies as a model for the
Okay.
law, you know.
I'm not as conversant on planning and zoning as some people, but I think that this is an example of something that we have discussed to death, and now we need a proposal and put it to bed and let it go.
Okay, well, I'd be happy to draft that, and I'd suggest,
And, you know, get it going.
so let's say I prepare a draft, the next workshop meeting would be after the next business meeting.
It doesn't have to be a workshop.
Okay.
If it's a draft of a law.
Yeah.
It'll be after the next two business
Okay.
work. It's the one in, there's 3 a month, the workshop's in the middle. So if it's not this one, there's 2 regular ones before the next workshop.
So that takes care of my B3 question, other than we know, Ariana and I both
Rocket
know,
science.
or have the list, and the clerk should have the list of the people who were here.
Oh, yeah.
That wanna be a part of this, and I think it'd be a good idea to just meet with them and incorporate all that. Okay, that's number 1 priority. Number 2 is the Niffen problem. We have talked about this among ourselves. Jason had a very interesting concept of mixed use. We had heard other ideas about all of this, and now I think it's time we have a proposal on what Mr. Niffen is gonna propose and how that all fits in, and I think it should have been done yesterday.
Well, actually, the first thing I did was, the mayor had briefed me on Mr. Niffen, the annexation and Mr. Niffen's property, as well as Mr. Casano's here, also his property. So one of the first things I did during the first week was make contact with them. And of course, Mr. Casano, we arranged, we've met several times already. Mr. Niffen, I said I'm at your disposal, Mr. Niffen, and what I'll simply do is follow up with him, because I've already gotten to know him a little bit through a smaller application he has before the planning board. He's a former planning board
Well,
chairman.
Mr. Casano and the mayor and Mr. Niffen have been more than patient
Yes.
with us in that we said we wanted to have a professional planner, and now we do, and now I think we ought to just get it accomplished. Now, that the zoning code, and you know we're going through the definitions and revisions and all of that, and this, your moratorium suggestion fits into this, in that we need to finish that up. And do we have a date set for that, that next meeting? With the with the planning board, the zoning board?
No, Katie, it's on Katie's to-do list.
I think she has it.
Yeah,
Okay,
she-
okay.
In terms of,
Anyway.
well, in terms of a moratorium, you know, what do we need in order to do that? Do we need like a scope of work of how long it will take us to do the things that the code changes we want to do in order to pass it? Like,
We're fortunate in the sense that this is deemed a type 2 action. In other words, it's presumed not to have a significant effect on the environment because it's a temporary moratorium. So there's not a large burden in terms of procedure. In other words, that can be, I could provide the text for the moratorium, and because it has that secret designation, that's not a belabored process. So
Okay.
we're fortunate in that because it's temporary, and as long as a local legislative body doesn't try to push the envelope with regard to the duration of the moratorium, then we're really acting in very firm, established ground. So.
can we just?
Now, I know Brian asked this in a different way, he probably, so I'm gonna have to be more specific
Can we just do that
on the temporary moratorium.
like next week?
Can we be type specific as opposed to zoning specific? Because one of the things that concerns me about our zoning code is it's all mixed up. And we don't really have what I think of as R1, R2, you know, in that sense. So I would rather have, if it's possible, and that's what I'm asking is, a moratorium on, you have to wait a while to build 2-unit houses. Or you have, you know, that would be one example. In other words, types of things, as opposed to everything in every zone. And more or less alluding to what you said, that the B3 can proceed to develop because the types of businesses and buildings that are gonna go into that would not fit in, I think, any kind of moratorium.
Well, I think what you said was that we could do it by this, like break it up into the zones now and say this zone.
Yeah, but see, the problem is, Ariana, that our
Most of
zones allow a lot of things that you don't normally think of in an R1
That's
zone.
why a moratorium is something you only do when necessary.
Yes, so
Because-
why would
but if we sat and tried to figure out every type of building that we might want to exempt from the moratorium, would mean there's a certain thing of every type of building that we would not want to have new zoning apply to. Because the reason you have the moratorium is to stop people from doing something while you change the rules. So
of a specific nature.
right, but if we're doing master plan and zoning, that could be very, very broad, and every rule could be on the table.
But I'm,
However,
see, that's what I'm,
Well, what I'm gathering is we may only be potentially concerned with certain types of
Yeah.
uses, perhaps in certain types of locations and districts. And yes, actually, we can break it down even further than districts.
I'm concerned about
Okay.
it all.
About it all.
because I don't want the other
too.
things
Oh, yeah.
that have waited so
Urgent.
patiently for us.
Yes, I
But we
know.
don't have to wait on it. We can do parallel tracks. We can change some of the code while we're doing the master plan switch.
But this is.
But Ariana had a good question I don't want to
Yeah.
lose track of, which was, you said you can have the local law drafted and whatever paperwork we need for a moratorium. Now, we have a meeting next Wednesday, which would mean you'd have to have it to us by noon tomorrow, or the meeting after. Which one is
Well, we make an
doable?
exception and say Friday.
Well, actually, the meeting after, only because what I would like to do is I would like to cooperate with village council, because a moratorium is something you certainly don't want to make any errors, and planners, I think that in this case, you want to work with village council, because then you have, you're covering both bases, both planning technique and the legal requirements, because obviously sometimes moratoriums are challenged. Sometimes there are applications for exceptions for hardship. As a matter of fact, that's probably something that will be in there. Potentially someone could say, well, I need to apply for a hardship exception. It doesn't mean it must be granted. But, so it's important that I collaborate with village council on this. So I would suggest the subsequent meeting rather than the very next one. So that's, let's see, that's 2 weeks.
Now those are the ones that sort of were immediately pressing. But the other thing that I have experienced, and I think Jason certainly had. There have been a lot of good studies done. Either we've paid for them or we've had a very conscientious group of citizens who, and the work has been fabulous, and then they just disappear under the woodwork. Now there is a bike ped study with priorities. Alan Stout was the chair when that was done, and now it's Bill Weinstein.
Right.
There's a sidewalk master plan as part of that too,
And
but
we both have
that
copies of
identifies
that.
like problem areas.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And then there's the Transportation Implementation Committee, which grew out of the study that Jason referred to earlier, and that was the big land use
Yeah.
study. But the Transportation Implementation Committee, Ariana and I both sit on, because I was originally on the committee, and she is the liaison. We've done all sorts of work with crosswalks, and there are recommendations, and
Well, I would embrace those.
we should get you invited to the next meeting.
Not only that, but again, as part of orientation in my first days and weeks, the mayor has actually provided me with copies of everything, and also, and much of it is quite recent. So in other words, in no way has it gone stale,
Right.
for the most part. So.
Oh, no, I'm talking, these are studies that have been brought forward by Jason, but some of them had to be, I mean, like the land use study is now what, 5, 6?
About that, yeah.
6 years old?
2006 was the,
The bike ped study, the first one done, is 4 years old, and they've updated it, but I mean, we need to start getting things done.
Those efforts should not be duplicated, and I should have actually prefaced it by saying there's an awful lot of information that I've been given. I've been, I'm now privy to an awful lot, and I've read most of these documents. So I want to embrace the hard work and the good work that was done, and turn it into a proposal for the village board to consider for adoption. And it's pretty exciting, because when you look at we obviously have a community where walking and cycling is extremely active. And again, there's a decent amount of courtesy and camaraderie between motorists and pedestrians and bicyclists, but this is absolutely a priority, and like you said, there's no need to go doing work that's already been done.
And I'm sure, if something came up and if you wondered if anything had been done, somebody on this board's got filed.
Yes.
Somebody. So,
And I have a lot of documents that I've been provided with. So.
thank you.
I have a few questions, a few things that I'm hoping you'll be working on. I'll second what Sally said about the Niffen property. That is a significant item, but hopefully something can happen in that in the near future. But I think that ties into several pieces. There's the Niffen property, which is adjacent to the proposed Millbrook Preserve, which is by Moriello Pool, which is by the B3 zone, so that whole chunk is kind of contiguous. So I assume we'll think about those things as how they affect each other when we look at it. On that, we have a grant, as you know, on the Hasbrook Park drainage. I heard you comment on the stream part. Are you tuned into what is being proposed for the rest of the park, the initial drainage plan, and what's going to happen? Or do you think we're up to speed on that, so that that'll be happening? Or?
Well, that's actually outside of Kurt's purview, since
Okay.
it's entirely engineering and construction. That would be really
Okay. Well, I would think that you might have input on how we go forward with the park.
Yeah, I don't think that that's true at all. There was basically a proposed plan for Hasbrook Park. It's in the
that's
trustee's
different.
office.
I'm talking about the actual
Well,
grant we
yes,
have.
but in order to make any of that happen, what had to happen first was these 2 drainage projects. So one of them has been completed. The second one we got a grant for. And that's what Stuart is referring to.
Who would be the best contact? Might that be Blue, DPW director?
Yeah, Blue
Or
and
Rich Ruth?
Mark Blauer knows
Oh,
about the
great.
grant
I've spoken
itself
with
because he's the
Matt.
one who
Okay.
got it for us.
Then I'll be able to get that information then, because actually I wasn't terribly aware of that, so.
Yeah, well, that's why we're doing this.
The planning aspect of that, I guess maybe Stuart could talk about whether it's on the table, but actually the day that 4 of the 5 of us took office, there was a proposal to landscape and redesign the entire park, after the drainage was done. And that offer was publicly withdrawn. So we're hoping
After
that,
5 years.
well, that none of us were here.
5 years
No, I
in a new
didn't-
board.
I didn't.
So we're hoping that we can reciprocate that
I'll
planning
put you in tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
So as, there is one trustee who shall remain nameless, who's on the board of the Community Foundation, I think. So we find someone, I don't know who to talk to.
He's at least very close to someone who is on the
Yeah,
community foundation.
Probably could. And my next non-controversial issue is, SUNY New Paltz Foundation bought 42 acres of the Moriello property
Yes.
contiguous to and it's not in the village, but it's on the edge of the village, and supposedly they have their own water, and so I don't know if we're all up to speed on what it is they're doing and how it will affect the village, but I can't imagine it won't. So I hope that we're going to be really paying attention to that, because we don't want to be caught by surprise by
As a matter of fact,
things
the
that
mayor-
are important that they're not going to tell us till later.
Well, actually, the status, and the mayor asked me to simply, he asked me if I was aware of the proposal, and then I began to look at reporting, at least in the local papers on it as it went along, and now I understand that a draft environmental impact statement actually has been required a little while ago and now prepared. So with that, right,
13
just like all of them, yeah. So I would be, just as I discussed with the mayor, trying to obtain a copy of that. We are either involved or interested, and I'll be able to tell whether that involved meaning more formally interested and we have some discretionary decision to make, or at a minimum interested, quite interested. And even that, it gives us status to receive these materials and of course comment, as anyone else might. So I have been tuned into that project, and I'm quite interested in it, yeah.
At your meeting on Monday night was Mike Calamano there. I
Yes.
was Mike Calamano. Be happy for you to have a copy of that report, Mr. Chair.
Yes, actually, I had the pleasure of meeting him the other night, on
I'm
Monday
sure
night.
he would
At the,
share that.
that'd be great, yes.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I have to inform somebody about the EIS.
Right.
I would just like to say, I'm so
Instant.
glad you're here, because some of these things, some of us are very anxious to get going in place. And so it will be fun working with you. Thank you.
And thank you, and actually, I feel comfortable that I have a pretty good list here, of all the items
It's
that are.
not short.
But, such is the nature of this
Right.
type of work, yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're just coming into it and we've had things we've been waiting for you for.
And there's other things on.
But I do have a question about the proposed Millbrook Preserve and what are you aware of this idea? And because there's a couple things that are basically stopping us. We need to, I don't know exactly how to jumpstart it, but I think that it would be really great if we did. We're waiting on comments from two
Michael
people.
Ziller and stuff.
Yes. And we've reached out to them and we haven't gotten the comments, and I think we should be able to proceed at this point without the comments.
Who are the two parties? Oh, so I shouldn't really chase.
Well, there's a proposed plan for the Millbrook Preserve.
It's like 2 years.
And there is a whole suite of landowners who are of varying degrees at various stages of yes to adding their properties or parts of their properties to a 300-acre preserve in the north part of the village with some of the surrounding town as well.
Mhm.
So there was a study done, a grant was received, and there were comments from the co-chairs of the open space committee of the town, which we've been waiting for, I believe, since last September.
We've been seeing it.
And well, it hasn't gone to anyone because the comments need to get received in Hudson, which would then produce the final report.
It was
So,
way before last September because it was
Oh,
way
that's what I
before I was
remember.
on the board when
Yeah.
the planning meeting focus group thing for it went on, and it was before
Well,
I was even
we don't
planning
have-
on running.
we're this close to having a study done that would allow us to apply for grant money to implement this preserve.
The fundamental purpose is to preserve certain lands either by conservation easement or purchase of development rights. Something
All
something
of that
lasting and
is
Well,
part of
enduring.
it'll be parkland, really. It's, the town purchased 42 acres, which is contiguous to the part of Woodland Pond that had to be left forever wild. And
Yes.
it keeps going down all the way to
And part of that
Different too,
property
you
near
know,
the
Niffin's
St.
near-
Vincent.
and Niffin's
Mr. Lent's
property.
property and Mr. Niffin's property. So
And-
there's a big chunk of land that could happen here.
So am I correct that this would be most appropriate for passive recreation and environmental education as opposed to several soccer fields and things
Right.
that might?
Hockey.
Yeah.
Hey Brian,
Hiking,
point to the next slide
It's
on
about
the map.
preserving open
See that
space.
stub of the village there that has nothing built in it, and you see the beaver ponds and all
Yeah.
that? Roughly 300 acres around that area.
There was even
Yeah, we're on
talk
it.
about not allowing bikes to be on the trails throughout there in order to really keep it so that it's not. I don't know if that was one of the final. I don't remember what came out of it, but that was one of the topics of discussion. Is well, do we want it to be carry in, carry out? Do we want bicycles? What kind of recreation it's going to be?
And-
Okay, well, that's
And coupled with that is, of course, that Mr. Niffin's property fits
Yeah.
Yeah.
in there, and it has some very interesting geographical attractions. And
Features.
what he hoped was to come up with a land use plan which preserved that, but then would require like a planned unit development density.
Or yes, or even
Preserve-
possibly clustering,
Rather
but
than just going 1 acre, one house, 3 acres.
Of course, yeah.
Which would go right. So he is very open to working. And then Jason had this idea that, and this is a larger picture, is that you would have a walking path from Main Street.
Oh, that wasn't mine, that was Floyd's.
Was that Floyd's?
He, for some reason, the property the annex has the right of way for a walking path connecting Henry Boyce and Main Street. So he was thinking about if the Millbrook Preserve ever happened, using that as like a bike path access
Bike
from Main
path
Street right to the
coming
Millbrook
from Main
Preserve and the
Street.
trailhead on his property.
I thought that was your idea.
That was Floyd's, it was all Floyd's.
When I first moved here, I lived on O'Rourke, which was off in the Powell down in the dead end in the town. But if you, I guess there was a guy that bought the property next to it, sort of cut it off and did development in there. But you used to be able to go through, cross over Shivertown, enter Old Hummel Road, and go down in, and you could basically go from Hummel Road up to North Pot. It brings you down to Moriel Pool, out to Henry Du Bois, out to the fire.
And
by
just
Fire
that
First.
is-
Yeah.
And it is the best biking and hiking you can do. But the problem with any of this is that it needs to be maintained. Because
Right.
the stuff grows in on those trails that you wouldn't believe.
Right.
So there's got to be some type of protocol put in place to maintain the trails so that people aren't stuck by sticker
They
bushes
don't
and,
use it.
you know, your general.
Or like a non-profit trail crew or something.
Yeah.
Like volunteer trails.
Yeah.
Goats.
could even be the equivalent of the adopt a highway.
I've seen people riding horses in there, I've seen people walking
Goats.
dogs in there.
Let the goat.
Lost on their mountain bikes.
Real clear about the point,
Still
baby.
had to get out of there.
Right.
The girl got separated from her boyfriend and she was all turned around. So there's gotta be demarcations on.
Yeah, it is confusing.
We've got a whole, it's a
Yeah,
whole
sure.
trail maintenance trail.
I've had the
plan.
experience of riding in parts where they allow mountain biking, and the next thing I know it's dusk, and I'm having a hard time finding my way out of it.
So I really think that's the biggest chunk left to preserve.
Now-
Definitely
But I think
something
you're
to be done.
on to a good idea. Once we get this plan in place, maybe
That has to be like top 0.01.
to adopt the trail like you adopt the
Talking about
highway,
that, I'm just
and just
talking
take
about finding a way
sections
that's
of the trails.
and really
And then
more
there's
into
some
this.
credit given by way of signs or other things. So no doubt, as a matter of fact, these types of links, people already, people in our community are so already active. I mean, there's so many cyclists that you can imagine if we enhanced the system and really branded it too. That it could really be something. Let me ask, now I understand that with Woodland Pond, we accepted land, as the state asked us to first look at land before recreation fees. And,
I don't think so.
and
Might have been an easement or
pilot.
something, but I don't.
well, did we get recreation fees from?
I don't know.
Well, okay, that's a requirement of state law, so we either had to get land or fees.
They might have,
Well, that's
they
what
might
I
have given you,
No, I was, no, I
done
was-
away the development rights or open green space.
What
That's what we got
We started
land, like
negotiations.
open land.
instead?
Oh, you
instead of
did?
money. Well, I wasn't. It wasn't
You mean
negotiated.
not-
It was negotiated before my time.
Not in fee, but they just said that it'll be forever green.
Yes, I think that's what I had heard. Now, okay,
Is that what it
so
is? Okay.
I guess what I'm saying is I wonder if the areas we've just been describing now actually connect.
Yes.
Okay, so they actually connect in that direction too, because otherwise it's obviously the most remote part of the village, and this annexation we did to allow Woodland Ponds to be developed. So, okay, so there is potential there to bring that into the fold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could really.
And the pilot study is on file.
Okay.
Any other discussion with Kurt?
I guess for me, I'm looking to have New Paltz be very sustainable in a way that I think that most of New Paltz does not understand what that would mean, and I think you do, but I don't think that people, when I say sustainable, people know what I'm talking about. Not that they
Right.
don't know, but I have something specific in mind, and
And
it's
also probably relatively long range, right? Probably, I mean,
forever.
yeah.
Is the idea,
Yeah.
the way that we need to, if we want to sustain ourselves, but without any kind of fossil fuels, and
You know what? Because I thought about that even before my first day here. What I thought was, gas may have receded a little bit in price, but the fact of the matter is that over the next 10 or more years, New Paltz could be seen more and more as a desirable place to reside and offer those types of amenities. And that goes for even our relationship with the town as opposed to just the village. So that's really significant. The only thing is, I don't want to be too morbid by suggesting that that gas will be $8 a gallon at some point, and nobody knows that. But we all know that there was a point recently where we weren't sure where it was going to go, and all of a sudden, at some point, it almost becomes you can't change your budget if you're a commuter to adjust to it when it gets to a certain level. We all thought that was $2, but we've long since passed that threshold.
Right.
But I agree. I think that New Paltz stands out, and partly because of where it's situated, not terribly far from the metropolitan population of New York City, and at the foothills of the Catskills and other places. It's just one of those things that I can't help getting away from thinking. And
there was a study done by CREO on campus. It's the Center for Regional
Sure.
Research and Educational Outreach, I think something like that.
Yeah.
But they did this study about how CSAs and farm shares in general, but even shopping at like a health food store or farmer's market, the people who are doing that, as opposed to people who are less engaged in where they get their food from, those people are more democratically engaged as well, and more into volunteering in their community and going to community events and just doing all these kinds of things. And they manipulated the data in a lot of different ways, and these were the results of it. And New Paltz has more CSAs and farms in our region than California. It's like all of it.
and at least one which dates back to the 70s, which was well before its time.
Exactly.
down by the river.
Yeah, so we're really at a point where we're primed for this kind of stuff, and what I talk about, and this is why I'm doing this whole chicken proposal, is the idea of food sovereignty, where we you can shake your head and roll your eyes all you want to, Stuart. I am not offended.
We're just laughing with you, dear.
Well, you know, we have our 125th anniversary, and if we want to be around for another 125 years, we need to look back at how we lived 125 years ago. And so this is the idea of having local food and not relying on this really, I mean, and not just in terms of food, but in terms of everything that's being shipped around. I mean, I think we're obviously on the same page here.
Transportation, I was surprised to learn that long distance transportation of food, even internationally with produce, was the transportation cost didn't used to be considered a significant factor. And even now, with fuel prices and especially diesel increasing, suffice to say that yes, I think that this is a really important component. It doesn't have to be all in one fell swoop,
right?
But moving towards it.
And I guess when I think about amending our codes, I think about amending things to have it be more environmentally friendly. I don't know how familiar you are with earth ships, but things like that are where I'd like to see our community go, is like recycled materials and sustainable housing.
Yeah, yes, I think it's, you take that piece by piece and then all of a sudden you have a comprehensive effort.
Exactly, but okay, cool.
I
mean, we can talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, downstate,
of course,
in the outer boroughs, there's an awful lot of rooftop gardens now.
Yeah.
So that, and even
my mom gets more local food than I do living in New York City because of rooftop gardens, especially without a car. It's wild. I'm jealous.
Well, that's definitely should be part of that. That's part of our future. Yeah.
Cool.
I have one other item that came to mind. We've been selected as a pilot community for
oh yes.
Zero waste. We're one of the little communities compared to some large ones in the United States for federal project. And I don't know how much your department will get involved with that, but maybe there's ways that we can leverage that project into doing other things we want to do. So I don't know if you're aware of that, or
And maybe getting grants.
Well, I would like to. Sure, actually, I'd like to educate myself rather quickly on because I probably don't have a particularly deep grasp of it. So, but this is a grant you mentioned that is.
Well, it's a federal program, and they were, I guess, fortunate to have someone who's involved with that lives in our community. And would we like to do this?
Works
yes,
for the
we
EPA.
would. And so we're part of this EPA pilot program, which there are not many, less than 20 or something in the nation.
13.
13. Okay, that's less than 20, isn't it? And so I don't know if that'll fit into the other things we're doing, but we'll have this period of time when we're part of this, so maybe that would be helpful to us. Certainly, you could teach us something anyway.
And Mayor has the file.
Okay, I should be well.
We can talk
acquainted
about
with
this
that.
tomorrow. I'm actually writing down all the things that we're going to discuss
Thank
now.
Thank you.
Anything else? Or can we?
I have one last thing to say.
Yeah.
When we look at the Millbrook Park, or Millbrook Park, on San Jose, Bevan guys, let's get some type of little nature center in there that we can give community workshops to the children, education on the environment. Because we don't have anything like that in this town for the kids to do. It's great and so. There's fishing, there's hiking, there's animals, education.
Yeah.
All this stuff should be for that.
Well,
Boy Scouts.
that's something to get involved with is the Newport Central School District, and they take trips to Mohawk for that kind of thing, and it would be wonderful if once we got this developed, Rich, that we could use that as an open lab as well.
Yeah, because I mean, down in close to New Jersey, there was a park, like a pond with just a little log cabin thing, and this one guy volunteered, and he held the classes over the summers, and it was free. There was no cost to go to this thing. It was just available. You could sign your kids up.
You volunteering?
I'll do it.
Yeah.
I know there'll be 100 people that will love to do that.
That's a great idea, Rich.
I think it is, I think it's fabulous.
It's gonna be, I mean, there's trails, there's enough wildlife in it,
Mhm.
the beaver ponds and the major pond below,
Mhm.
the woodland pond, and the dams and the frogs and turtles.
Mhm.
And it's just about everything up there.
Yeah.
You know,
And we
that,
could
Tires and cars
groups
for each.
together.
There's that too.
which is bridges are already there, you know, so it's just.
I mean, there are appropriate ways of developing trails and
Okay, that's a
inappropriate
great-
ways.
Sure.
There are enough.
They're all there, right?
Right?
All right. Well, we got some time before we're making a decision on the Millbrook Preserve, but thank you so much, Kurt, for coming
Thank you for having us.
this evening. And
Yeah, this is great.
it is 8:34. We have just a few more things on the agenda, but you can take off, head home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You want to move the budget modification?
Do you have anything other than the? I thought it was just the one
The budget modifications from Nancy.
for the uniforms and for
And we
the.
have uniforms
Yeah.
with those two things.
All right. Well, I'll move that we approve the budget modifications for the DPW uniforms.
And award the bid too.
Is this something that we did not budget for
And
initially?
award the bid to uniforms.
Can I have it? Well, hold on. I'm sorry. Let me make my own
USA.
motion, Sally,
We
please.
took it out of the budget, is that what you're saying?
Yes. So I'm going to move that we.
Why did we take it out of the budget?
Can I make a motion before we discuss it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm gonna move that we approve the budget modification for DPW uniforms and approve the quote for Uniforms USA.
I'll second.
Thank you. The reason that we have this is we did take it out, but there was actually a good public health or I guess personal health reason to leave it, to put it back in, which is that the DPW uniforms in particular are worn by people who jump into open pits full of raw sewage, and maybe expecting them to bring it all home and wash it at home might not be the healthiest thing that we could be doing. So we renegotiated the contract with our existing, our prior vendor, and we've removed the cleaning from every other uniform. So it's just for the DPW because
And the
they deal with such other, the things that are really you don't want in your home.
Right.
So that's the thing
Like
behind
poison ivy.
it. Whatever. Yeah, I mean, with kids. I mean, God,
Got
a
it.
kid hugs you when you come home. You don't want them.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
know.
No, but it's a good question. Yeah.
Are these maps the ones in the DPW, or they're the ones in the
Your maps all
downstairs
over.
Village Hall?
Yeah. If you look at the thing, you'll see that.
I was thinking about that too.
Yeah,
We do need these mats.
What's that all about? Like, do we really need?
Actually, I think that's an OSHA thing for offices, for rain, water. You have to have some kind of.
though?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I was thinking the linoleum floor kind of thing. The rubber
Yeah,
mats.
I mean it's all like carpeted down there. That's why.
What
Yeah.
did did any of you check with Nancy about that? If that was a question, or Blue?
Well, no, I'm pretty sure they are, but I was
Yeah.
wondering why we needed them down there. And
It didn't. It couldn't be asked.
Yeah, that's next year's budget.
yeah, I also wasn't sure we were gonna make a decision on this tonight or if we were just gonna discuss it. But
This one I think was a decision because we need to keep them clean.
whatever.
Yeah,
We
I
can't have a
guess-
gap in a week or two where we're not cleaning anything.
I guess I was curious about in terms of whether or not we are supposed to be voting at these meetings. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah.
I put it on the agenda because we didn't have it, it was too late to do it last week. We need to award the bid.
And
Okay.
if you see the rules that we have, it actually does
Time
specifically
sensitive.
about workshop things that do some
Things that are timely, yeah. Well, that's why I didn't know.
And
you
it
know.
has been on the agenda since the agenda packet came out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. My only question is in terms of the environmental charge or the fuel charge, would it be like what is that going to? I guess these are questions that
You'd have
I
to ask
should have
that.
asked
Yeah, some
before.
yeah.
To their bottom
Ask
line.
Nancy or Blue.
I didn't even think of it till now. It's going to their bottom line. Well, because if there's a good reason why we'd want to pay like 10% of an invoice instead of like $1.50 because it's going to something that we want to support, I would support that. But
Yeah, I don't even. I have no idea.
okay.
You could get them to clarify.
I mean,
that.
we can always amend it later if you find out that it's something worth doing.
I think a lot of trades have that kind of charge. The people who are trash haulers on your bill, they have both of those. So
Hmm.
must be I don't know if it's
So
a
it's
state
state
surcharge or
regulated,
what,
yeah.
but
Alright.
I don't know the answer, but there is an answer, and
All
it's
of
pretty
them are
widespread.
surcharges now. unfortunately. This, I have to say, and I'll say it publicly, we should be very happy with the work that Lou did. He got this reduced down by $3 per uniform, which I think is
I think it's,
significant,
yeah,
and should be
significant.
applauded.
Yeah, I just don't think we
Maybe
should
so.
have mats in the downstairs if we have carpeting, but I think it's kind of wasteful.
Yeah.
Well, fine, I think there's a reason why we do.
Yes, I know.
That's all you gotta do. I mean,
Well, I mean,
Tracking
it's,
stuff in.
if we all vote it, then it's kind of too late at that point. We're gonna go back and figure that out.
we, like I said before, though, we can always amend this too. We can,
Can we switch the can we switch the contract a week from now, or, cause I feel like we're tying ourselves in. to the
Yeah,
agreement.
if we sign a contract.
May I say something?
Yeah.
These are budgetary questions that should have been asked a long time ago,
We
in
should-
my opinion.
but we
And-
removed this from the budget.
Not the mats, we never removed the mats. The mats have always been in the budget, we adopted the budget, and it seems to me, if we wanna have a mat discussion, the appropriate time is when the budget is being developed. The only reason the mats are in is because we got a better price on them for us. Okay, the uniforms are the budget modification.
But I mean, it's on the agenda, it's in the contract, so I figured it's
Yeah.
worth bringing
I mean,
up.
I don't think it's irrelevant for us to discuss it right now, especially because, you know, we can look forward and think about this for when we are doing the budget, if we talk about it now, if we agree on something. But I mean, I'm not against doing this, I just had questions. Sorry. I don't want to vote on budget modifications without asking.
Are there
But-
any other questions?
Well, but
And I didn't
the
know
other-
we were voting tonight.
When we get to this, the part of the agenda where we talk about procedures and getting ourselves back together again, I am going to ask that we all be more conscientious of reading our packets ahead of time and asking questions ahead of time and not at the board table when things need to be acted upon.
Yeah. And I think we all do sometimes, and I think we all don't sometimes. I just didn't know we were voting at
Yeah,
this
I'm gonna
meeting.
ask that we don't vote on items. The workshop meeting.
For what reason?
Because that's what we had originally said we would
We-
do.
Well, if you look at the rules that we approved, which we'll be discussing, it actually has provisions for voting on items at workshop meetings.
This isn't an emergency.
And this is because we should.
Well, I
It
mean,
was
technically it should have been
late.
done, technically it should have been done at the beginning of the year. So I'm just saying, if you're
That's,
just trying to make a, just, if you wanted to make a point, I just wanna make a point.
you
so.
made your point. Thank you.
Well, there is a motion on the table and seconded. Is there any other discussion? If people feel it's inappropriate to vote at workshops, you can always vote no. But anything else?
Let's go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Sally, do you want to take this? This was your idea, the review of board procedures.
Yep.
Exactly.
Though, it is 8:42, and we were talking about maybe getting it 9, just kind of.
I
So
like
do you
that.
wanna,
Let people
do you
know.
wanna do the transfers that we need to do?
No, I want to do the rules and procedures first.
Because we might run out of time.
All right. Sure, then make the motion.
Okay, I move to approve the budget transfers that, to close the books that we have received from and were necessary as a result of the auditor being in office. No?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now,
Now-
Sally, do you want to take the wheel for the board procedures discussion?
I just think we've gotten a little off track this year. And some of these things we talked about throughout the year and we just agreed to do them and then just sort of let them slide. And Brian brings up a very good point about, and I'm very proud of the workshop meeting tonight because it isn't crowded with a lot of activity.
Right.
And that's one of the things that in our conversation, Jason and I, that we're concerned about is that we're getting off track on some of the things that we have agreed to do, and workshops are to be exactly that, workshops, to talk about ideas, for us to bring ideas and say to the rest of the board, shall we explore it or let it go?
Yeah.
And to have some of our department heads to come and talk about ideas with us. So I think tonight was a good example of the way we want to do workshops. Everybody
I would
agree on
agree,
that?
yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah.
An area that I think is a big concern to me, and I know Jason's thought about it, and we all got his memo. I want to first of all add that I think the mayor's new concept that we saw this week on
The
an
memos?
internal memo once a month, in some cases once a week, informing the board what the mayor is doing, what department heads are doing, and I suggested we add ourselves, since we have been remiss on our committee reports, that we include ourselves in this. And I think that that's a really great idea that I hope you will develop, because I think that would take a lot of, some of our questions at the table would clarify things that we might be wondering about, and whatever happened with this, and where is that? If we had this kind of internal, or once you get it, you could write me a question and say, you said, what do you mean by that?
Okay.
So I think that's a really neat model that's being developed, and obviously it's got refinements. I mean, the mayor said that he wanted to add some refinements, but I do think it is a great idea, and I think you should pursue it. My major concern is our attorney. I think we are overburdening our attorney and not using him well. Because, and we talked about this last year, because I remember I'm asking you, you mean every board member has the right, to ask the attorney, and I found that very strange.
Sure.
I think it is becoming, as more and more issues are coming into the fore that really need his advice, his attention, just as Kurt sat there and said, well, I really want to review some of this first. I think what we need to do, if we can agree on a process, and I had suggested that any board member seeking legal advice will forward the request to the mayor, copying the village clerk, because the village clerk should know everything we asked. That was your thought last year. That she would keep the log on this. Okay, and then either the mayor directs that request to the attorney, or he writes back and says, Sally, that's a good idea to have that reviewed, please send it forward. In that case, if I send it forward, I always remember to copy the mayor and the clerk, so that there is the ability to, one, prioritize the importance of the question being asked.
Mm-hmm.
And we will all agree to understand some things that need review, like the handicapping thing, would not take precedent over a litigation coming up in court. A litigation, so we understand that we may get shunted back for a while because we have a court appearance.
Okay.
Okay, so if we could all agree to do that, I think it would serve all sorts of advantages. One, the mayor would always be in the loop, the clerk would always be in the loop, and the attorney would not be in the position of wondering who's more important to satisfy. He would be able to understand these are all board requests because they are coming through the mayor and the clerk, and they need equal attention, and he doesn't have to feel, oh, I need to get to Brian first, or I need to get to Sally first. So that we just have an orderly process, okay? We don't necessarily have to copy each other unless we want to, but I really think it's very important that the mayor know, and the mayor be the point person along with the village clerk, so he can say, oh gee, Sally, yes, please send that to Joe, but understand, you're not gonna get an answer for 3 weeks because he's in court for us. And that way we're all sort of, and we don't get upset, that we don't have a response. And I just think Does that,
Yeah,
would
though, I
that
think,
work for you?
yes, but I don't think it necessarily has to be, sent to me for me to ask Joe. Even just copy
Well,
me
you
and the
have
clerk
to know
on.
though.
But Joe and I talk every
Right.
week, and Joe is also, I
Yeah.
think you all got the email. Joe is here Friday mornings if you need to speak face to face. So, and between that and the memo, I think it's good. But having that, just to make sure having multiple sets of eyes on what our lawyer is working on would be helpful.
But I do
Because sometimes
get-
I don't know that he's supposed to be
Okay.
working on something for
But
someone
no, but I think it's very important, Jason, that you have the ability to say, this legal question to the attorney takes precedence
Oh, yeah,
over.
yeah.
So that's what I'm trying.
Right, and we have those conversations
And I
anyway
will write this
now.
all
Yeah.
up, and we can refine it before we get.
This is already how I operate.
Hmm?
This is already how I operate. So
Yeah,
this
I
is,
get
I have
CCs
absolutely
on
no
everything.
problem.
But we don't
with
all
this.
always do it. So
Right.
we just gotta get in the habit of doing
I
it.
mean, the only time I communicate with
Mm-hmm.
Joe where you're not CC'd on an email is, the secondary follow-ups
Yeah.
where, you
Little
already
things here
know
and
that
there,
we're
yeah.
working
Right.
on this,
Right.
and he and I are just going back and forth.
Mhm.
But,
Yeah.
but I try to be aware. I mean, I know that
Which is helpful,
he's got a lot on his plate. Well, yeah, you also don't want to be inundated with my
Right.
back and forth emails.
But having things on the radar without having to get lost in detail.
Exactly.
He doesn't need to know the details or the
Exactly.
questions
That's
back
well,
and
Just the
forth.
and that's
topic,
why
yeah.
I'm saying
Okay.
this is how I
So
already do
I will
this.
write
yeah.
this as a procedure to staple, if we all agree, onto the
Oh.
procedures. That was my stapler. The other thing that I want to bring up is, we've got, and we can talk about how to do this. When we talked about board members having the right to add things to the agenda, that meant by Thursday with background, okay? So in other words, if Ariana has something she wants on the agenda, it goes on the agenda and that's that. What my concern is, sitting at this table, adding to the agenda an item that, one, is not time sensitive, two, the rest of the board may not know about, okay? And three, the mayor doesn't know about, and I think that's wrong. And I don't think we should be doing it, and I think it has caused a lot of problems at our table in the last couple of months, because we've gotten naughty and been doing it. So it just seems to me that if something comes to our attention that is an emergency or time sensitive, the very least we do is pick up the phone and consult with the mayor about it.
I think that's
Is that fair?
absolutely correct. Yeah,
Okay, I'll add that.
and I think part of doing the workshops the way we're supposed to be doing them will help with that, because I know for myself I often find that I want to put something on the next agenda, but in order to have something on the next agenda, I have to do it between midnight tonight and noon
tomorrow morning.
tomorrow.
Right.
Now, that's
And,
the other
and that's
question.
not something that we're going to be, sometimes, yes, we do, but
Could we, and
mostly
that's a
not.
question for the mayor, because Ariana's right about that, that is hard to do. Could we make it noon on Friday, or 9 o'clock on Friday morning?
Well, what I'm saying though is actually that I think this is less of a problem, because when we're putting it on the next agenda now, it's not 1 week from the first Wednesday
every
of the
2
month.
weeks.
It's every
Yeah,
2
okay,
weeks.
so that's
So it
not-
gives
okay.
any of us a full week to do any of the research that we want to do and come
Mhm.
back with the answers to any questions
Mhm,
and
mhm.
all that.
And additionally, I find that, like Katie, for example, with my Facebook proposal, I sent her a note before Thursday at 12 saying, hey, I want to add this to the agenda. I'll have you the documents by Thursday at 4.
Mhm.
So, I mean, because she can come in the next day, have
Exactly.
the ability to set her schedule and make sure she can make
Okay.
the agenda.
And-
So,
and
really,
part of the
It's
reason
about
too
the
is,
notification part.
partially, but it's
too.
also, if we do it Thursdays at noon, that means if there's something missing or something we have to, like Stuart has something and there's a document missing that's important, it gives us 24 hours to get it before we actually have to make the packets and
Right.
PDF
Okay,
it
so
and
the
have it online
agenda,
by
okay,
5.
so
So.
we agree, the agenda item needs to be in Thursday by noon, but we have a little latitude to get
Yes.
it to the supporting document
Exactly.
in.
Until we start making the
ask.
packets.
I don't even assume that it is. I always ask. Would it be okay?
Okay, right.
You know,
That's okay.
Katie's been very funny with me. She's
Yeah.
like, Ariana, just tell me what you want added to it. I'm like, sorry.
Okay, the third thing this is just within our process, and I think we need to talk about. Those were the two biggies, and I think if we can really handle that, it would make our life and the mayor's life a lot easier.
And Katie's life.
Yeah,
anybody's.
but that's my other thing. We have a requirement, and the law has a requirement, that minutes must be available to the public 2 weeks after a meeting. They can be date stamped, unapproved, but they must be. And we also have within our procedures 3 days for minutes to get to the board.
So.
And
I've discussed this with Katie, and she is clearly, we were in the weeds. She's almost done with all of the minutes, all 7, and I told her yesterday, I believe. Apparently for some reason she was waiting to send all of them at once, but I told her to send them out.
So yeah,
Just send them out, send whatever she has to send them out. She was doing like 2 or 3 versions. I realized she was checking a couple things on the DVD. Just because the draft, and the trustees will, if there's something that's correcting 9 times out of 10, the trustees will catch it.
Right.
So you don't have to kind of fact check your own minute. So
Right.
we shortened the time that takes, and it's going to be, once we're caught up, it will be just automated every.
and I don't know about anybody else, but for me,
The laptop, right?
I need
Yeah.
the minutes, just because.
You're good with them. You use them as a very good tool. I've noticed.
Well,
You know,
you get to
I
reference
read
stuff
them
out,
for the next
remind
one.
us.
us
Yeah.
of things.
No, you're very
And
good.
it's very, I feel very, because
Me
a
too.
question came up and I asked Jason about it, but I didn't have the minutes to go
Right,
back
right.
Yeah.
to reference to even answer the question that I needed the answer
Yeah.
to.
We talk about so many important things within one night. I feel like my brain, goes on overload, and I can't remember all the details. That's why I'm reading the minutes.
So, I mean, if, one of the things that I suggested as a solution, and I talked with Kelly about it earlier, and that is, I always thought the laptop that the clerk used at meetings belonged to the village, and
No.
it doesn't.
No.
And I think we should think about next agenda, buying a laptop so that this.
I think it's going on the next agenda. Actually.
Yes, I did.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we.
I asked for it.
There was
It's already in the
talk
folder.
about that.
So that,
So,
do you
yeah.
have anything, did you want?
No, that's it. Unless there's something that people don't want. I mean, I'll try to not be, a robot about it, but kind of stick to these more. But if there's something in here that people don't think we should be doing,
Okay, and we
So,
all got the memo that followed mine, asking for your ideas about how we can work this better. We all got the memo from Jason asking that we be more considerate and that he has the right to bring the gavel down on us, and I think he does, and I support that. So.
right up until I try to bring it down on you.
Better budget
But
a
until then,
gavel.
she's on my side. Until then, she's on my side.
We better budget for a gavel for her. That's
Yeah.
okay.
It'll end up broken.
Yeah. I need one of those big cartoon wooden mouths,
Yes.
So I'll type these up
that
and I'll
sounds
get them
perfect.
out
Wait,
to
wait, wait.
everybody.
Process to follow for seeking and appointing volunteers. We didn't talk about that part.
No.
What?
There was one more thing you. These are your items. Daniel. Process to follow for seeking.
Yes, we need to have a date to interview people who have signed up to be volunteers. And one of them we have already interviewed, and we really need to appoint that
I was-
position because we have a person going
Yes.
on leave.
I'm gonna add that to the agenda for this week. or
Okay,
next week's
can
meeting.
we begin our meeting early next time and interview anybody?
Let's see how many people who have.
Well, we know we have 2 for Shade Tree.
Right. So let's see how many other requests we
Okay.
have. If we just have 2
Let's
or 3,
get-
then
let's
we'll
get
do
it
in the
done.
meeting.
Okay, well I think that this is important. I created
Right.
that I only realized later that maybe we should approve this formally. I created an application for village volunteers and interns that I actually used for interns last fall, but I didn't even think about getting it approved by the board. So maybe we can approve it so that at August 5th, and I'm going to invite all of you to join us. I hope you're all right with this. Stuart and I are going to have a table at the 125th, and we are going to table to gain village volunteers.
Good.
Great. And start promoting Team New
Paltz.
Paltz.
Agenda? Put it on?
Yes.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about
Did you
it.
say Team New Paltz?
I did. T-shirts,
And the other thing,
last name.
and,
Yeah, oh, that's pretty sweet.
and
Right.
I don't know if we can call it Team New
Ariana,
Paltz.
the other thing we don't have
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the final.
Oh, come on.
It's like the Twilight thing, really? That's what we're doing now?
What's Twilight?
Vampires in the winter.
Sally, please.
All I know is.
All right, Brian, come on. We're almost done with the meeting.
The other thing is, will you have Amanda get the final wording on the brochure that she wants to publish for the students?
Yeah,
That is not to us yet.
I know.
Okay.
I mean, Katie and I talked about that. I said
Okay.
that I'm still waiting on it from her.
Sally,
Alright.
did you want to change the time of the next meeting just because I'll have to tell her to notice?
Well,
I don't think.
Notice that.
I don't think
I didn't know if
you
you were
don't
Yeah,
just
thank you.
suggesting
We can't
that.
decide
the
that.
mayor doesn't think we need to do that, but we do need to, we need to set 2 dates.
I'm getting suspicious.
Interviewing volunteers, and that we've gotta get done.
Yeah.
And we need to set.
Do you want that on the next agenda then?
No.
Well, no, I
I'll-
want Jason
I've
just
got
to
it.
set
Don't worry
it.
about it.
Alright.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
Jason to set it, and for Jason to set a meeting, I think Katie had a date for the next meeting to finish the zoning revisions, because we put an extension on that to August, and
I'll
we need to
send,
get
I'll
it
make
done.
She
sure
was
to
already been
include a
emailing about
note
that.
to have her send you.
But if any of you would like to know the priority of something that Katie's working on, feel free to call Katie, because I don't necessarily know it from day to day. It depends what fires come up that day. I'll second that.
Second what?
Move to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
No,
No? You can't say no. You vote no.
You didn't
can't
ask me
demand
if I had
it.
any comments on
I
something
don't
on
need
the
to ask. You
agenda.
can speak.
Okay, then I vote no to
All right.
adjourn.
What do you want? What do you want to say? We're not adjourning until you're done.
Thank you. First of all, on setting the agenda, it was said that we're going to be talking about our procedures, but then when we got the agenda, which was too late to add anything else to the agenda, it had a limited number of things on there, and there's several things that, if we're going to talk about the procedures, that I would talk about.
Oh, excuse me, may I say something? You got an email from me asking for your input
It's
to put on the agenda.
I know.
Thank you very much.
No, it was on the agenda that we're going to talk about the rules.
you were
So,
asked to say.
and I'm ready to talk about the rules. I mean, do I have to email, this is the 400 things I'm going to talk about at the meeting, or do I come to talk about the rules and say whatever I want to about the rules, which is what I assumed incorrectly. I would like to second the part about the minutes. I think we should stick to that. 3 days, 3 business days, I believe it says, out, because that'll keep us out of trouble, and then the board members should be conscientious and get back to the clerk within that time. I'm certainly in support of everybody on the board being able to put whatever they want on the agenda as long as they do it timely. My idea on the contacting the attorney, first of all, I don't know if I've ever contacted the attorney about questions, so it's not something that I'm yearning to do every day, but I think that we all on the board should be able to do that, and I think the way to control that is for the members of the board to be able to send something, an inquiry to the attorney with a copy to the clerk and a copy to the mayor, and that at each meeting the mayor can hand out a sheet and say this is currently what the priorities are, and if anyone wants to object they can at the meeting, so they've had their input, and the mayor will set it out, and it won't be a huge burden because it'll be in a word processor, and a lot of these things will stay the same, we're going to move them around. And then the status reports like the one was in the packet, I was really pleased to see that. I think we were remiss in the early part of our administration in getting those reports, and we didn't really know where we stood, so I think that's an excellent idea. Another thing that's in the rules, besides sitting at the end of the table, is that we were going to ask people their names. We can't require them to give us their names, but we were asked them to give their names and ask them to step forward, I think we should still do that. They can refuse, and that's their business. And then-
Even on public input, or do you just mean presentations?
No, I would do it on public
comment
input,
too.
Okay.
because, you know, then they're on the camera, and that's fine.
Well, they do get on the camera, but
Yeah.
this is.
I would prefer that.
Close to the
But
microphone.
they might be uncomfortable.
I mean, that's what I would
It's a
prefer.
choice.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they don't
I
have to
agree.
come up if they don't want to, but we invite them to come up.
Right.
And we
Okay.
invite them to give what their names are.
Mhm.
And the question of the workshop meeting like tonight, if we're gonna vote on things, are we allowed to call it a workshop meeting, or do we have to call it a regular meeting? Even though the intent is, for the most part, to do workshop type things, but.
There's no legal distinction.
Yeah, okay.
We just
because-
internally we call it this because we do
Okay,
this.
because I think that's what happened after
This-
we were gonna do the workshop meeting, and
Right.
it came up before, and it says, no, you can't call it a workshop if you're gonna vote. So if we don't know that already, we should know from our attorney, is that an issue? Because the way the notice is given, and they have to say something. So I just think we ought to be on grounds about that.
We discussed that
Yeah, we
before,
did.
and
Did we
I
get
think
an
that was why we decided to just notice this as a regular meeting.
But then we started acting like a regular meeting.
And then we
And
started,
that's-
that's how it happened. That was exactly how it
So I
happened.
mean, you might have to notice it as a regular meeting, but
But
it'll
for
be
our
agreed
purposes,
that it's a workshop
exactly.
meeting, except for those few minor or
Yeah.
essential
Your point
items
is
that we have
that
to
if
vote on.
something, our intent is not to take action on things, but should we have to, we have the right to do it.
Exactly.
Right.
Is that
that's-
what you're saying?
Yes, and I just wanna make sure we're doing it
I'll
correctly,
ask-
whatever,
I'll ask Joe.
whatever the real answer is, we ought to do
I
it.
recall us talking about
This is what we
this
do.
before.
That's why it's in the rules.
So specifically, it says exactly that. I think.
So, what else you got, Stuart?
That's it.
Oh, great.
Now maybe we move to adjourn?
Let me check. Anyone else have anything else to discuss? Motion's on the table, all in favor?
Is there a second?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all, and thanks
Thank you,
Kelly.
Kelly.
No.
You're welcome.
No.